All right, my voice is pretty beat up today, and I couldn't possibly explain why. I haven't been yelling. I haven't gone to any sort of concerts or anything. I think this is just some sort of virus that just went straight to the old throataroo. There was like a 24-hour span where it felt like I couldn't clear something out. Anyway, I'm going to do my best. There is not going to be the usual vocal flair on today's show. What I am going to do is kind of an old broadcasting trick of boosting my volume, giving everything a little bit of an extra kick in the pants on the old mixer. And we'll just kind of talk our way through today's show. Because if I start to yell, the voice is going to go real fast. Welcome to Friday's edition of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm your slightly kneecapped Dan Besbris today. I'm at Dan Besbris over on Twitter, and you can follow at Old Man Squad on Twitter as well, which, again, will follow back. Anybody out there wants a free follow, go follow Old Man Squad. Plus, you'll also get updates on everything that our amazing hosts at the Old Man Squad Sports Network are up to these days. So it's a double winner. Today, we've basically got two teams to cycle through. The Wizards and back to the Warriors. Yes, I am a fan of, that must have been late 80s, right? When did the original Wizards and Warriors come out? 1987. Knew it was 80s. Played that for the regular Nintendo. Yes. That was a weirdly hard game, actually. Anyway, we're talking Wizards and Warriors today. I will also try to mute my microphone when I have to clear my throat or do other delightfully disgusting noises on the broadcast. And the first name on the list to talk about is someone that I've kind of been putting off all week, not for any reason in particular, mostly because I actually kind of love it. And I wanted to make sure that he was the title player in some episode of the show this week, and that's Jonas Valanciunas, who I faded this past season for the first time probably in his career. Like, we've been on this show super high on JV almost forever because he's always been a ridiculous per minute guy. He's been in the NBA for about 11 years now. I think he came out in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Where did he end up? 5th overall pick? Oh, yeah. Forgot about that. He's 32, so he's kind of on the wrong side of prime, but he's also not really on what you'd call the extreme downslope yet. What you saw this past season was basically what I thought we were going to have the whole year, and really only kicked into high gear during the second half of the campaign. And that was that the Pelicans were going to run small. They were going to run a lot of Zion at the 5. They were going to run some Larry Nance at the 5, and it wasn't going to leave a whole lot left for JV. So this year for Valanciunas was the lowest minute count for him since the start of the 2018 season with Toronto. Pre-trade, he was at 19 minutes a ball game that year. One of the big differences that season, 2018-2019, is that he was a usage behemoth in his 19 minutes a game. He was taking almost 9 shots, basically the same number of shots he took this year, but in 4.5 fewer minutes per ball game. So his numbers were almost exactly the same that season and this season in, again, 20% less playing time. So not only was JV playing a lower minute count and much more, frankly, like the end of his tenure in Toronto, but he also just wasn't as heavily involved as he has been the last 3 or 4 seasons in Memphis and New Orleans since Toronto, and frankly, towards the end of his Raptors tenure as well. Throughout his entire career, Jonas Valanciunas has been an excellent field goal percent guy, 56% from the field, and he's been about as freaking consistent in that number as you'll ever find. In fact, we can just rattle them off lightning round style. During JV's now basically dozen years in the NBA, he's shot 56, 53, 57, 57, 56, 57, 56. That was the split season. Then he was in Memphis 59 twice. And then New Orleans 54, 55, 56. Some of that's a slight uptick in three-point attempts. Not a massive change there. But, 1.5 3-pointers as opposed to 0 or 1 on, he's not a great three-point shooter. He's 35% for his career. Not awful for a center, but again, not going to help the numbers there. It's better to look at what JV's done from two-point land throughout his career, and that's also been remarkably consistent. Started at 53 to 56 range, and then has slowly been working up into basically like the 59 to 61 neighborhood, and that's where he's been for about 6 or 7 years. He's also a big man that hits his free throws at a 79% clip. This year was 79, previous year was 83. He'll usually sit somewhere between those two numbers. What Valanciunas does not do is get defensive stats. And basically, it's because he doesn't really defend. He's not a good defender. And that was a problem for a Pelicans team that at normal health this season, for a large portion of the year, they actually had their guys. They didn't need Valanciunas to big body people around and get some buckets in front of the rim while allowing people to blow past him like a traffic cone at the other end. They needed someone to defend at the 5 or just let it be Zion if it's going to be someone who's not defending very well but attacking the rim like a monster. So JV just kind of became expendable and obsolete for the Pels. Something that I thought was going to be the case the entire season, but really only kicked into gear after about the first 2 months. Because as you may recall, in December, I came on an episode of my old show, and I basically was like, look, guys, I think I screwed this one up. I think Valanciunas is set to have a better year than we expected because he was playing 27.5 minutes per game at that point. And then all of a sudden, the other one, dropped. JV was a top 50. He was number 45, by the way, around the end of December. 15 points per game, 10 rebounds. He was actually at 1.8 defensive stats, largely because he was playing so many minutes, but medium volume, good field goal percent, low turnovers. He was a wonderful 9-category big man, doing kind of a little bit of everything almost. And then they stopped needing him. If you look just after the All-Star break, and we'll just sort of like eliminate the mid part of the year because, I don't know, for simplicity's standpoint, we'll go from like February 1st to the end of the season. Valanciunas fell like a brick. Top 200 on under 20 minutes per ball game. 0.8 combined defensive stats. 9.6 points, 7.6 rebounds. It was ugly, and it got ugly fast. This, however, works in our favor because, first of all, we got it right this last year. We knew he was going to get phased out because the Pelicans were trying to win, and they needed a center that could do basically the opposite of what JV was doing. That's what you saw happen. The Wizards, on the other hand, have a smattering of centers, if you want to call it that, because they re-signed Richaun Holmes. They still have Marvin Bagley, but Richaun Holmes is kind of broken. Bagley's bad. And they just went in, they paid Valanciunas a bunch of money. That's maybe the most important element in all of this. The contract. Jonas Valanciunas is being paid like he's going to play. It's not an overwhelming contract, but it's long. I forget exactly when the news broke of JV's contract. I think it was pretty early on during free agency. It's only $10 million a year, but it's 3 seasons. The Wizards basically were like, we want you to be a veteran big man who can clean the glass. And we know that most of our team can't defend anyway. So who cares about your limitations? Just be healthy. Play 80 games for us this year or until we shut you down or whatever's going on there. And don't let us get pushed around right in front of the rim, specifically on offense. Like, we need our guys to have some big dude that can just go slow the game down and get a post bucket. Because Holmes can't do that. And Bagley got a better shot at it. But also, he's Marvin Bagley. I don't think the Wizards had a plan of making this a three-headed monster. Plus, we also heard that the Lakers, like, one of the names that LeBron James apparently floated, or his camp floated, that he'd be willing to take a small pay cut for, was Valanciunas. But he likely didn't go that direction because his job with LA was going to be playing pretty much backup minutes to Anthony Davis at the 5, which is probably 14 minutes per game. And then against gigantic opponents, they go twin towers. So like once every 2 to 3 weeks, those guys play alongside one another, as we saw with AD and Christian Wood at times this year. And so in my mind, Valanciunas is like, I don't really want to do that. Even if I could championship chase a little bit, I'm going to go to this place. The Wizards are going to pay me some money, not a ton, but they're going to give me an opportunity to basically show that I still got it. And in all likelihood, JV's going to be a Wizard this year because you sign a 3-year deal. No one's taking that on. They're not going to go get picks for 2.5 seasons of Jonas Valanciunas. Next year, maybe trade him with 1.5 years left on a pretty affordable deal. Or the following year, he becomes a very tradable asset. And that probably parallels a bit better to the Wizards kind of coming out of this rebuild. Or like maybe the tail end of it. Either they keep JV for that part, or they can still auction him off, maybe get some seconds or a late first or something like that from a team that's making a run at it 2.5 years from now. And great, it ends up being a really nice investment. From a timing standpoint, this is, or a minutes per game, I guess I should say, standpoint, this is where things get a little bit complicated because if Rashawn Holmes and Marvin Bagley are both healthy, one of those two guys is going to be the backup. They have Alex Sarr at the 4 and Kyle Kuzma on the trade block. I am basically handicapping the Wizards as if Kyle Kuzma is going to be gone, which is also not really a fair thing to do because making a trade in the NBA is not a simple thing, especially if you're a team like Washington that's not going to want to get fleeced in this. They want to get something good back. We've heard the Kings have been attached to Kuzma. We've heard the Lakers have been attached to bringing him back. I'm sure there's another team or two out there that hasn't been as, vocal and obvious in the Kyle Kuzma sweepstakes. But the Wizards are going to want to make sure that they're not just giving him away. It's an opportunity to get stuff because Kuzma's not old yet. And his contract is not prohibitive like Zach LaVine's or Jeremy Grant's. Not that Kuzma's not getting paid. Like he's making a pretty good amount of money, but it's not overwhelming. I think he's in the middle year 1 or year 2, maybe, of like a 4-year, $90 million contract compared to what a lot of these guys are making. I mean, I need a censor button right now. Bleep, like freaking Franz Wagner just signed a 5-year extension worth up to $270 million. Zach LaVine's making $50 million a year. Kuzma's making $23 this season. That's not bad at all. And his contract goes down. He has the front-loaded deal. It's an extraordinarily easy contract to move if the Wizards decide they want to. And, I got to think they do. And we know Kuzma likes Los Angeles. So I feel like something's going to happen here. I don't know who's going to come back. My assumption is that it's not going to be a power forward that the Wizards are intent on playing because they'd like to open up playing time for Sarr. And who do you put with a young, not yet built out, tall but not thick 4 that may grow into a 5 to make sure that teams aren't pushing that dude around? You put a big bruiser type. And that's specifically what Valanciunas is. A bruiser. He's huge. He's a frickin' Goliath. He's a monster screen setter. It's the kind of thing that young teams really do need. So I would expect Valanciunas to get at least 23, 24 minutes a ball game, which doesn't sound like that much, especially after we just talked about the fact that that's basically what he played this last year with the Pelicans, and he was outside the top 100. But his job is going to be so much easier with Washington. He's not going to have to bend the knee to Zion and Ingram and CJ McCollum on a play-to-play basis, especially if Kuzma's gone. But even if Kyle is still there at the start of the season, you're talking about Kuzma and you're talking about Jordan Poole are the two guys that Valanciunas is looking at and going, you mean I got to kick it out to these dudes? All right, Kyle, I like you. So maybe he gives it up to Kuz. But you think Valanciunas is going to give the ball back to Jordan Poole if they're trying to figure out who should take the shot, who's going to have a more efficient offensive play? Nah, man. Legitimately, there were three guys on the Pelicans this year that you could argue were a better option on offense than Valanciunas. And at the very least, you'd say Zion was way more efficient. Ingram is much more efficient. Now, Brandon has all of his other issues, but from an efficiency standpoint, he's pretty efficient on offense. He's just sort of like kind of an antiquated style of offense at times. McCollum has his shooting stuff, but, floor spacing and so forth. Jordan Poole was one of the least efficient shooters in the NBA this last year. I don't think Valanciunas is going to be intimidated to to give away offensive looks in favor of Jordan Poole. Just think about like the mental gymnastics you have to go to be like, oh yeah, Valanciunas, he's like third in line behind Kuzma and Jordan Poole. Sure, Poole probably takes more shots than JV does this year, but I think my assessment of how this all shakes out is that you're going to look at a Valanciunas that has a usage rate that's much more similar to Memphis JV or late stage Toronto JV, as opposed to this past season in Nolens JV. I mean, just think about the previous year in New Orleans when Ingram missed half the year and Zion missed 2/3 of the year. Valanciunas played only 1 minute more, but took 1.5 shots more. That's actually like a pretty remarkable downtick from last season to this one in terms of shots per minute. Last year was at 10.3 field goal attempts in almost exactly 25 minutes per ball game. And you can do the math, 10.3 divided by 25. 0.412 roughly shots per minute on the court. This year, 8.8 divided by 23.5, 0.374. That's a 5% downtick in what he was doing on the court, on top of basically like a 5-ish percent. What's the math there? 25. Yeah, about a 5% decrease in minutes. And then on top of that, a 5% decrease in what he was doing in the minutes he was on the court. So it's a double whammy. If you give him a 5% bump just in what he was doing on the court, like don't even give him more minutes. Let's say JV plays exactly the same number of minutes this year as he did last season. 23.5 times 0.412 would get him to 9.7 shots per game. That's what you would have assumed he would have done this year in 23 and a half minutes. And it was at 8.8. Almost a full shot lower than expected. And because he shoots 56%, every shot he's taking, I mean, you guys can do the math here because just roll the usage together and then there's the free throw element and all that other stuff. He was at 12.2 points per game in 8.8 shots. 12.2. Look, we'll do the math right here while we're on air. Divided by 8.8 is 1.39 points per field goal attempt. Let's make that 9.7 instead of 8.8. He's at 13.5 points per game instead. So if the usage rate didn't dip like it did, he's at 13.5 points instead of 12.2. And if he's not playing alongside Zion so much, the rebounds probably don't go down 1.4 rebounds in only, like we talked about, 1.5 minutes per game. He's not grabbing a rebound a minute. He's grabbing less than a half of that. The rebounding rate was down. The field goal attempt rate was down. Assists was the only thing that basically stayed constant for JV. So all you've got to do, and again, we're talking about over the course of an entire season here, like, It's not going to be the JV that's inside the top 50 at the beginning of the year. He's not going to be the one that's back near the edge of the top 200. All you have to do to get Valanciunas back inside the top 100 is to give him that 5% usage back that he left on the table this year. That's it. And if there's anything beyond that, whether it's additional usage per minute or an additional minute on the court or a minute and a half or whatever you think it might be, which again, not certain yet, that's gravy. That's how he bumps farther up the board. The 5% usage gets him back inside the top 100. Another minute of playing time gets him probably inside the top 85, and on and on and on. And as we talked about, if you get him up to 27 minutes, which I don't think is going to happen, he's a top 59 category guy. So there's a pretty high likelihood that Valanciunas is going to be on the old man squad board. But got to see what his ADP is going to look like. Can't make that call yet. It all takes time. All right. Topic number 2. What do we see? Questions from the chat room. Dan, do you think JV is going to get 25 minutes per game? I think 25 is probably about where he tops out. Honest to goodness truth. As much as I love Valanciunas, I don't think he's going to be able to hold 26, 27 minutes a game for an entire year. They're going to want some young guys to get in there. They're going to play some smaller lineups. I think 25 is a pretty good target for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was more like 24, frankly. Dan, where do you think Lauri Markkanen's going to end up? That's a great question. I have no idea, bud. I don't have a clue. I really don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter that much for me. I mean, I guess if you were trying to make a dynasty trade and guess where he's going to end up, there's probably no place that he goes where his job is better than it is in Utah. So he's probably a bit of a sell high at the moment. Where could he go where he continues to get over 16 shots a night? San Antonio, maybe? Maybe Golden State. I don't think he's going to end up there, but the baby sell high, he's probably just hang on. All right, speaking of Golden State, that's the other team that I wanted to kind of cycle back to today because we did a show on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember which day it was, where we talked about the Warriors bringing on DeAnthony Melton and losing Klay Thompson and Chris Paul. And at the time, it sure seemed like there was just a lot there for the newly acquired DeAnthony Melton. Well, since then, the Warriors have gone ahead and added Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield, both guys that figure to play, I don't want to say starters minutes, but rotation minutes for this Warriors team. How much is, again, debatable, but now suddenly you've basically replaced 2 rotation guys with 3 rotation guys. Klay was around 30 minutes a ball game this year, slightly under that when he started coming off the bench. Chris Paul was around 26. That number came down towards the end of the year when they started to run more Kuminga, Podziemski, and Trace Jackson-Davis. They still have Andrew Wiggins on the roster. For the moment, they still have Moses Moody, who I don't know, everybody's super excited about, but I'm not. And then, obviously you've got Steph Curry and Draymond Green still hanging around. So now suddenly you've got Steph, who's going to play starters minutes. You've got Dre, who's going to play as close to starters minutes as you can get. You probably have Kuminga playing pretty close to starters minutes. And then you've got to figure out how everything's going to get the distribution, rather, between Podziemski, Trace Jackson-Davis, DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, and Kyle Anderson, and Andrew Wiggins. Sorry, there's a 6th name on that board. And Gary Payton II is going to play some if he's healthy enough to. I went from super bullish on Melton to extraordinarily concerned about taking the plunge on Warriors players this year. And I'm not talking about Steph. Obviously, Steph is going to be fine. He probably shoots the ball better this coming season. Maybe. I don't know. assets around him haven't really gotten better or worse, but hopefully he has an uptick in field goal percent, and you could justify a late first-round pick probably even after he finished number 22 this last year. Not the main point here. Main point is, what do you do now with the rest of these Warriors? Let me go through them one by one. We'll start with Buddy Hield because he was acquired by the Warriors in a sign and trade. It's a 3-year deal, although the third year is basically an extraordinarily low dollar amount season. So if they had to, they could just not deal with it. It's more like a 2-year deal for Buddy Hield. And the Warriors are hyping it up, and Shams and Woj are doing their part to make it sound like the Warriors got the steal of the century because he makes so many three-pointers and blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing about Buddy Hield, guys. We've now seen it for how many seasons in a row? I've lost track. Teams give him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning, and then eventually they figure out his limitations, and they kind of pull the plug on what he gets to do. Indiana being a prime example of that. He finished out the 2022 season in Indiana playing 36 minutes a ball game. He was ridiculous. He was like a top 30 fantasy play during that stretch. Came back with Indiana each of the next 2 seasons. His minutes were lower the following year, down from 35 and change to 31, which was still good enough. But as Indiana acquired anybody with a pulse that could play defense, his minutes became very unreliable. He started for a few weeks, then he came off the bench for a few weeks, and he ended up outside the fantasy value circuit this past season. And then it happened again. Got traded to Philadelphia. The team was without 2 or 3 guys at the time. He played like 32 minutes a night for a couple of weeks, and then it scaled back into the very low 20s, high teens, once Philly was like, okay, all this dude can do is shoot the 3 ball. There's nothing really else to his game. I don't know. I don't see any reason why we should expect things to go differently in Golden State than they have everywhere else. You could say, oh, the Warriors, they're known for fixing guys or whatever, but are they really? There's going to be space. He's going to get shots up. But, I personally think if healthy, DeAnthony Melton's going to be a guy who plays more than Buddy Hield because he can defend some people. He can shoot the 3 a little bit, maybe not as well as Hield, but the combination of skills for Melton is just more valuable than that of Buddy Hield. And they've got Slow-Mo, and they've got Wiggins, and they've got Podziemski. They have options where we're going to be looking down the barrel of it again and saying, how do we handicap consistent playing time for Buddy Hield this year? It's going to bounce around like a sine wave again. How could it not? Do we think he's going to start? Is he going to take Klay's spot in the starting lineup? Klay wasn't in the starting lineup at the end of the year. Steph, Dre, definitely starting. Is it going to be Trace Jackson Davis, Wiggins, and Kuminga as the starting 5? Is Wiggins out and Hield instead there? Is Podziemski out? Wait, I didn't even have Podziemski in the starting 5? I don't think he was even in there. I don't even know who's going to start for the Warriors. Is it going to be Melton? Is it going to be Hield? I'll say this. If Hield is starting, I would feel much more comfortable spending a late draft pick on him. If he's coming off the bench, I don't think that you can do anything with him at all because you'll have games where he plays 26 minutes and takes 15 shots, and then you'll have a game where he plays 19 minutes and takes 6 shots. And the fact that he doesn't do enough other stuff when he's not any kind of primary focal point on offense limits the appeal. I have a bad feeling, and this is like the pit in my stomach guy who's played fantasy sports for a very long time. I have this pit in my stomach that Hield is going to start, and he's not going to be that good. He's going to be like top 115, top 120 as a starter, but he's going to do just enough so that Melton gets stuck at like 23 minutes per game, and he also can't get to fantasy value, and the Warriors are going to have this sort of abundance of mid-tier guys, and they're not going to know how to utilize them on a night-to-night basis, and you're going to get consistent minutes for Steph and Dre, who's drying up in fantasy value himself, and probably Kuminga, and then we're going to spend the whole frickin' season going, should I or shouldn't I on Hield? Should I or shouldn't I on Melton? Should I or shouldn't I on Trace Jackson Davis? Should I or shouldn't I on Andrew Wiggins? And so, as of right this moment, July the 5th, and we'll probably amend this as we learn more, mostly a training camp, so probably don't do your draft before training camp, or at least not if you're going to target any Warriors. Who Golden State is actually going to be playing this year. And you won't get the exact minute totals during training camp, but at least you'll probably get an idea of who the starting five will be. And that's troubling because I really wanted to draft Anthony Melton, and the acquisition of Hield, in my eyes, makes it really hard to do so anywhere before like the true flyer zone. Because what do we talk about on the show? What are the three tenets of drafting? You're looking for 1, minutes, 2, usage, and 3, fantasy stat set. Melton and Hield both have, interestingly, fantasy stat set appeal. Kind of different ways, but they both have it. When they're on the floor, Hield tends to have some usage. Melton, not so much. And then minutes, I don't know that we know for sure on either of those guys. So you're looking at like 1.5 to 2-ish, somewhere 1.75 out of 3 of our boxes we need to check. What about Trace Jackson Davis? Same issue? So let's check training camp. We'll see who the starter is. That's probably the direction that you'd want to float at least the beginning of the year. And I mean, mind you, by November 15th, it might have flipped. Warriors might have been like, yeah, Buddy Hield's a starter to start the year. And then they're going to lose like 4 out of 6 games. They're going to go, man, Anthony Melton's the starter now. Like, that would not surprise me at all to see that exact thing happen. Are they going to go TJD at the 5, get a little rim running and flying through the air? Because if so, that pushes Draymond to the 4, pushes Kuminga to the 3, Wiggins the 2, Hield the 2, Melton the 2. You need some spacing, don't you? If that's the direction they go, it's probably Hield at the 2 because they need somebody that can just stand in the corner and hit 3-pointers. If you're playing Draymond and Kuminga and Jackson Davis, that's just not enough spacing. So probably Draymond to start. That at least allows them to go whatever route they want on the wings. Kuminga, Wiggins, Hield, Kuminga, Wiggins, Melton. We just don't know here. So right now, I'm pretty damn concerned about most of the Warriors. I'm concerned about the fact that, as we just mentioned, you've got 2 guys locked into consistent minutes and basically 6 others, and we don't know how they're going to shake them out. That's probably 1, maybe 2 too many. Probably 1 too many players there. At least if we lost Clay and CP3 and added 2 guys in their places, you could look at it and say, okay, I can kind of wedge the numbers around a little bit. But how to jam another 22 minutes in or pull it out of the bucket, I guess, well, that becomes pretty wacky. SB says, why are you not as big a fan of Moody as others? I'd rather the Warriors start him over Podziemski. I just haven't really seen much from Moody. Everybody keeps, like, the Warriors keep floating him in trade discussions like he's going to be something magical. Doesn't shoot the ball all that well from the field. Doesn't really have a big-time three-pointer yet. I guess he hasn't really had any opportunity to show it, but every time that there are these moments where it's like, oh, yeah, this is going to be a Moody day, then he just kind of vanishes. So maybe he still gets there. It's possible. I just haven't seen him turn any kind of corner for that team. And it's been pretty evident in how he's not getting any minutes. Like, the Warriors know it better than the rest of us, and they keep watching. They're like, yeah, he's not ready yet. So that's why. And you know me, I'm SB. I'm not willing to wait all that long. Redraft until the end of time. I don't like Dynasty all that much. I don't like being locked into anything for that long. If I make a mistake, I'd rather fix it the next year. And if I get one right, I can just feather in my cap and I'll try to get another one right the following year. Give me a clean slate. I love starting over. It feels so fresh and new. It's a delightful time. There was one other thing that I wanted to do on today's show, and now I'm struggling to come up with it. What was it? Oh, you know what? I wanted to talk about Franz Wagner here for just a second because he did sign a massive deal that I mentioned earlier on the show. that could be worth as much as $270 million. Also, I'm realizing that my voice is kind of loosened up a little bit, but also I can feel it beginning to tighten up. So quickly on Franz, he played 72 out of 82 games this last year, 32 and a half minutes per ball game, 19.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.4 blocks, 1.3 threes, 48-85 splits, 1.9 turnovers. He was number 69 in 9 category leagues on an Orlando team that basically just re-signed everybody of value and brought in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I'm concerned is not the right word. I'm not concerned about anything with Franz. He's a very good young basketball player. Maybe the better term would be unable to figure out where the next leap comes for him. Because he took a pretty good leap this last year. Not a massive one. Jumped about 25 slots in ranking, and that was largely because he took about a shot and a half more this year. And that translated to just sort of better production across the board. His minutes were almost exactly the same. I think the rebounds better. 4.1 up to 5.3. Yeah, the rebounds got better, interestingly enough, this year. And then the other stuff all pretty much was on the kind of a linear path. Like you gave him an extra shot and a half, and then the numbers went with it. If he somehow finds his way to another shot and a half, that would be great. Can we get him to 16 shots a game instead of 15? Hard to say. Although, I'll give you this. If he's getting drafted around 60, he's a very safe floor, like late 5th to 6th round pick. There's almost no way that he's worse than like 80 this season. And so if you draft someone at 60, 65, and they finish at 80, you kind of call that like a little bit of a wash. But in that range, I'm still generally looking for someone that I think could bounce up into the 40s. And I have trouble seeing the outline here when you sort of like squint at Franz Wagner's numbers and say, okay, how does he get another 2 rounds forward? And it kind of has to be additional usage, which as long as Banchero's there, just sort of isn't available. The way that Franz gets more usage is if Banchero misses more than 2 games in a season. But so far, Paolo's looked pretty damn durable. And then everything else kind of stayed the same for the Magic. Again, other than bringing things in. So I like Franz a lot. I just think he's also a very kind of boring, safe play in the 60s. Because that's probably where he's going to finish again. I don't know. Field goal percent was already pretty good. Does he add a little bit more in the 3-point range? Possibly. There's just nothing super obvious about it. It's not like he's going to magically start blocking shots now. His steals are already fine. The minutes are already pretty high. He's already the number 2 usage guy on the team. Where is the jump? So I don't see a jump coming for Franz. I see just continued solid production, probably between 50 and 75 or 80. That's the window, and that's safe. That's fine. Like I mentioned, you draft somebody at 65, they finish at 69 or 70, you just call that a win and move on. It's not a game-changing win, but you got a decent value for your pick. That's okay. All right, wrapping it up before the voice goes kaput. Thank you for an amazing week, everybody. This was far and away the most successful week we've had in the the very young, mind you, the infancy here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball, particularly on the YouTube side. Folks are beginning to find it. This is kind of what I was hoping would happen as free agency rolls around. It now has. Then you get to what's next? Leagues probably opening in like a month. People are going to start to figure out that I'm in a new place. And so I'm extremely gracious for whatever you guys are doing out there to make sure that folks are able to find it, whether it's by liking the YouTube video. So please do that now. There's, still a half dozen to a dozen of you guys that are watching these things live. Anybody watching it after the fact, please do hit that thumbs up button if you made it this far. Subscribe. And then over on the traditional channels, just keep pumping away. Keep subscribing. If you haven't done the 5-star review, please do so. There's a lot of you that are listening that haven't done those things yet, and I really do need your help right now. Thank you again for an amazing week. Next week, we got guests coming out our butts. Yeah, that's right. I said coming out our butts, meaning you got to hold on to your butts. Alex Rickleen, Dan Titus, Mike Barner, Matt Smith, and oh crap, I'm forgetting somebody, and I'm going to feel really bad when I remember what it was. Oh, Mike Catron, I think. Yeah. So we got two Mikes and Alex, Matt and Dan. I forget what order. In some order next week, that's all going to be going down. We're also going to talk to Rhett Bauer. Rhett Bauer in the very near future. My good buddy, Dynasty Maven, Rhett Bauer, has officially moved his family of 1 million children back to Indiana. He's settled in, and he's going to give us a take on the most impactful dynasty decisions that folks are now making after the draft and after free agency. That'll be coming up either next week or early the following after that. I am Dan Besbris. Same thing over on Twitter, DanBesBris. Old Man Squad on social media will follow you back. Have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you soon. Oh, also, I'm trying to do some shorts on YouTube now. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, later for real.